There are quite a few strange myths associated with hotels, some of which date back to the very beginning of these places. Some stories were completely made up by one or more managers wanting to attract more customers to their hotel. But others are so horrible and true that no one would want such a horror lurking in the shadows of their establishment. The chambermaid is one of these legends, and unfortunately for me, I paid the price. I write a fairly popular blog online. On it, I cover all topics related to the paranormal, urban legends, and UFOs. And sometimes I come across rather interesting testimonials from readers. Some will talk about their own home, claiming that it is haunted, that an entity would spend its time moving furniture in the evening, or even knocking over glasses during meals, etc. Others, however, are much more interesting and clearly deserve all my attention. I have already conducted an investigation in a new place, where horrible things happened without anything happening to me during the entire investigation. However, I have also conducted an investigation in a place without history and obtained amazing results throughout the evening. What I'm gonna tell you is a kind of mix between the two. The Wheat Hotel was rather quiet at this time of the year, and when I received the email telling me about the horrible legend of the Maid, I was able to book a night immediately, even though it was in the middle of the week. It's a very classic hotel, located in a small town and quite isolated from everything. He survived as best he could thanks to passers-by and Slava's regular customers. Tourists, who after getting lost in the middle of nowhere, are looking to spend a night in a cheap hotel, or truck drivers taking a short nap before hitting the road again, or even people like me, curious to learn more about this so-called legend. When I arrived in front of the hotel, I immediately imagined that all this was just a big masquerade. The places were unsanitary. Long ivy vines ran along the old bricks of the building, going as far as to tickle the edges of the many windows. The grass in front was poorly trimmed, and the flowers, scattered here and there in pots arranged anarchically on the terrace, were rotten due to lack of maintenance. I immediately imagined that this legend could only help the hotel to welcome more curious people, and therefore more customers. No gardener, no renovation work, and places isolated from everything. That was the challenge, even as the hotel was financially adrift, and a small local legend could only remedy a good part of the problems. After observing the disaster a moment longer, I pushed the heavy reception door. The interior was as classic as it gets. A long, worn-out brown carpet was under my feet. It started from the entrance door and ended up awkwardly under the receptionist's table, revealing crude folds that once again proved that the hotel was no longer maintained as vigorously as in the past. The tapestries weren't even worth lingering over, as they were so simple and monotonous, even if, sometimes, horrible flowers would land there, right in the middle of one of the walls, making the atmosphere of the room even more depressing in the process. Speaking of which, the receptionist at the front desk seemed to be in the same state as her wallpapers. Depressing. But thank God, there were no flowers on her service clothes.
Hello, sir. Have you made a reservation?
I would have liked to say no and make a U-turn. Only, and unfortunately for me, it was non-refundable. Yes, good evening. Even before continuing, I noticed an annoyed look on his face. At the time, I didn't understand, so I continued. A reservation under the name of Magnoli, please. She looked at her computer monitor for a moment and turned around without saying a word. After a moment of rummaging through a large board where there were a good number of keys, she turned back to me, still sulking.
There you go, Mr. Magnoli on the 3rd floor. Good evening.
It was then that I realized why she looked annoyed. When I said good evening to her, it was likely because she had greeted me at 9 post-meridium, and that her mistake was definitely my fault. Seeing her dejected expression, I took the elevator without responding, preferring not to dwell on it. During the ascent, I found myself saying that the depressing atmosphere of the hotel also managed to bring out something rather supernatural in me. I had the feeling that I was not alone, as if something was hiding behind the horrible wallpaper of the reception, under the old brown carpet, or even in the empty gaze of that receptionist. I was particularly pleased to feel this, as it allowed me to really get into the mood for investigating. When the small bell sound echoed and the metal doors opened, I then discovered for the first time this horrible dark corridor. There was always this same hue everywhere in the hotel, of a fairly light strand, mixed in places, with a bit of white or red. The walls this time were painted a blood red, reminding me in passing a scene from Shining in Kubrick's film. taking place directly in one of the overlook's toilets. After a moment observing around me to soak up the atmosphere of the place, I continued my way to the room. According to my source, the chambermaid of room 306 only wanders the corridors on the hotel's 3rd floor. As you can guess, it is therefore not by chance that I chose to sleep at this height. However, I did not choose the room, and my misplaced mind quickly made the connection between what I was about to do and the number of my room. Investigating a ghost in a room that directly reminds of the devil's number. Multiplying the 3 at the beginning by the 6 at the end gives his favorite number. Wasn't necessarily something that everyone would do after all. I had the idea that this would allow me to increase my chances, that the ghost of the maid manifests itself to me, even though, deep down, I didn't really believe in this story at that time. When I pushed the door of the room, I was first surprised by something really unpleasant. The smell. You probably know it, but it's a very strong, musty smell, like what old furniture gives off. The room was filled with it. The wardrobe and the closet in the room seemed to have been there for at least tens of years. In short, it was an old smell of age, of death. Afterwards, I was rather surprised by the cleanliness of the room. Upon looking around, I found neither dust nor stain, and the bed sheets were clean and well ironed. I then closed the door behind me, and immediately looked at the poster that was stuck against it. The reader had explained to me in his email that the rooms were only made in the morning, around 10 or 11 o'clock, and that all of this was specified on that poster. And indeed he was right about the service hours of the maids. So, if one of them showed up in the middle of the night, I would know that she is not an employee of the establishment. My reader explained everything to me about his demonstration, down to the smallest details. From midnight to 4 in the morning. If one is awake in this hotel, it is possible to hear someone knocking in the middle of the night at our door. According to my reader, that is the maid, an entity whose exact origin is unknown, but who knocks on doors until someone decides to open for her. He said one must never open the door, no matter what. He even advised me to place cameras outside in the hallway to directly observe its appearance. However, it was probably illegal, and personally I didn't really want to pay extra fees or spend time in a cell explaining why I had placed cameras in that location, while violating the privacy of the other hotel occupants. So, I was already prepared to open the door for him if that were to happen. You must then probably think I'm crazy listening to this, but think for a minute. Have you ever heard of ghosts that ghosts that can directly harm you? I'm not talking about poltergeists or other entities capable of moving certain objects, but about visible ghosts. It's simple. No one has ever been directly hurt by a ghost. This has never been officially observed. So why should it happen to me for the first time in human history? As I said earlier, I was quite skeptical about all this. I've never actually seen a ghost, let alone one that could hurt me. So yes, I decided to open up to him if the opportunity should arise. In the email, he also explained to me that in addition to not having to open up to him, I should definitely not talk to him. That I could therefore record her on video while she bangs on the door and nothing else. That would already be there, a breathtaking paranormal video. He also quoted a phrase to say at a specific moment. This is a Latin phrase that I unfortunately could not let you hear for reasons you will understand later. I'm still not certain about the accuracy of the translation, but it would mean abandoned lady, come claim your due. According to my reader, this would actually be a kind of counter-incantation to prevent her from entering the room. So she's supposed to pick up what I've placed just under the door and then leave. That was the only hint from my reader, the most important one. Slipped a tip under the door, so I played along and placed €3 in coins. Around 10 o'clock, I was sitting on the bed browsing my various networks when I heard a strange noise coming from the hallway, so I got up and immediately pressed my ear against the door to hear better. It was a soft melody, as if sung by a young woman. Just loud enough for me to hear, but not too loud to disturb anyone. So I looked at the time and it was past midnight. My heart suddenly started to race. I wasn't sure it was her, but I had this growing hope inside me. I wanted it to be true. I wished deep down that ghosts exist. So I waited several long minutes as the song intensified more and more. Someone humming in the hallway in the middle of the night was slowly advancing towards my door. My hands were getting more and more sweaty as I started to record on my phone. For a moment, the idea that it could be a perfect hoax brushed my mind again, but quickly, I was cut off in my thought by a soft, almost inaudible noise coming directly from the door. The scariest part is that she had completely stopped humming, and what I hadn't anticipated was my tetany. I couldn't move anymore and I was shaking all over. The knocks seemed to be getting louder and louder, and I felt a fear that I had never experienced before. A sense of imminent danger. I felt that I absolutely should not let him in. I was extremely afraid to speak to him, because the only sentence I was normally allowed to say to him was the one in Latin in the email. No other, so I hesitated for a moment, because it was the perfect opportunity to finally prove that ghosts were indeed real to my entire community. I then took my cell phone, paused the recording, and gently slid my phone under the door camera facing up, hoping to capture a video sequence. I waited a few seconds and picked up my phone with my fingertips. After a moment, I selected the video and played it without waiting. I would never have expected to see such a thing. From the start of the video, her face was in close-up. She had leaned just above the camera lens. She was staring at him with her unmoving eyes, or rather, she was staring at him with her black sockets, completely empty. Dried blood seemed to have flowed from her two gaping holes and ran down her cheeks to the corners of her lips. Her long grey hair fell in front of her mouth. However, her mouth had a small peculiarity that I had never seen in anyone before. It was sewn shut. Almost fell backwards as the pounding intensified, hands trembling. I then opened the email with the intention of being able to say this sentence and get rid of it forever. I had all the necessary evidence to write a perfect article. I didn't need an additional trauma. The maid was very real, and she was certainly going to leave me with years of trauma. I didn't need anything more. What turned my stomach the most, aside from those horrible beatings? It was time. It was midnight. It had already been at least a good 20 minutes since it was midnight. And yet, the time hadn't changed. It was still midnight. I felt that I had to act quickly, that I had to say the sentence so she would decide to leave. I knew that the time would never change, that it would always be there knocking, until I finally decided to open the door for it. But that was out of the question now. So I said the famous Latin phrase out loud, and the very moment I finished quoting it, the door opened. The dark figure then began to slowly move into the room. It seemed to be limping or trembling, or perhaps both. If its bones weren't creaking ominously with each of its movements, I could also say it was perfectly silent. It moved slowly in slow motion, as if it was stuck in another dimension, where time does not flow in the same way. Its face was terribly frightening. Its sewn mouth and empty eye sockets gave it the look of a poorly patched rag doll. Its dark grey hair swayed from right to left. Its movements were so clumsy. With her right hand, she was pulling a sort of cart that all maids have, filled with all sorts of cleaning products. But these were different. They were worn out, old. Most of the labels were all faded or peeled off. Blood was found on the vast majority of the towels, and the cart itself, completely made of metal, was partially rusted in places. That's when I noticed that the cart was squeaking as she moved forward, but the horrible creaking of her bones was predominant. It clearly overpowered that shrill sound. I still didn't understand why she had entered the room. The sentence was supposed to scare her away, not give her the strength to enter. I saw her slowly wandering around the room, moving her head from right to left. In her other hand were the pieces that I had placed under the door. I mechanically wanted to ask what she wanted to do to me, but I remembered one of the main rules: never speak to her. I waited, huddled against the wall, waiting for her to finish what she wanted to do. She grabbed a product that was in her plastic bucket, from which a nauseating smell was emanating, and wet one of her dirty rags. She then grabbed it and started scrubbing the walls. Immediately, the white walls began to slowly turn pink, then red. Blood accompanied her every motion. Abruptly, she began humming once more. She was rubbing for a long time and was so busy that an idea then crossed my mind. I wanted to get out the door as quickly as possible, but she was only a few centimeters from it. So, I started to slowly stand up, and it was at that precise moment that she stopped. Abruptly, her body still facing the wall, had become perfectly still. Her hand was still holding the rag against one of the spots she had just made. But she didn't move an inch. Even in her blind spot, she saw me. She saw me move, even though she doesn't possess God. So, the next moment I decided to put one foot in front of me to try to run as fast as possible. With nothing left to lose, I knew I would die either by her hand or from a heart attack on the bed. Fear was emanating from every pore of my skin, but no sooner had I set foot on the ground than the door slammed shut with extreme violence. I fell back onto the floor out of fear, but also despair, as the dark silhouette against the wall slowly resumed rubbing and humming. She did this for several minutes, and I could do nothing but watch her. She cleaned the nightstand with a broken little broom, dusted most of the furniture, leaving more dust than before she started, and she even used a greasy and dirty product to clean the 2 windows of the room. Her song was slowly driving me crazy, and I wondered, even though I hadn't really become so. I only wanted one thing, to leave this place, but I was at a dead end. The time didn't change, it was always midnight. I knew I was no longer in the same world as usual, and that I was rather in her world, hers. As my despair began to gain ground, an idea crossed my mind: the window. I could very well escape through this place. But at the same moment this idea crossed my mind, she once again stopped what she was doing, and then slowly she turned towards me. I still couldn't get used to that horrible face, and I did everything I could to avoid looking at her. Then, she did something horrible, something I absolutely did not expect. She pulled on the thin thread that sewed her lips together. Gently, but with a lot of strength, blood started to flow from her fresh wounds, falling in small drops onto the bedroom carpet. She didn't seem to be in pain and quickly managed to tear all the string. Her lips started to hang in shreds down to her chin, and almost in a whisper she said,
Before I leave, I have to clean up one last thing.
I didn't respond and just looked at what she had in her right hand, which I hadn't seen until then, a large rusty knife.
I have to clean everything inside you.
I ran to the window as fast as I could, but remembered a detail before attempting to jump through. The ivy was thick and covered the entire wall of the building. I opened the window as I heard him coming quickly behind me. His bones cracked even louder, but this time, from his mouth came small, almost wild and primitive grunts, his hands still trembling. I hoisted myself onto the ledge as best I could, and before I could grab the ivy that was just below my window, I felt a cold hand touch my cheek.
You will never get rid of me.
I then grabbed the ivy firmly and jumped. When I heard the ambulance siren, I immediately thought I was out of trouble. Upon opening my eyes, I saw the ivy hanging above my face. It had clearly helped cushion my fall, and I only felt a slight pain in my back. A paramedic explained to me that I had been found there, on the ground, unconscious. The fall must have been harsh, but thank God, I wasn't really injured. I looked one last time at the window of my room, and all I saw was the curtain floating outside, pushed by the wind. You might think that I then went home, that nothing horrible happened to me afterwards. Only that's not quite the case. I did go home and I did write an article about the maid. Unfortunately for me, the videotape was empty, as if nothing had ever been found behind the door. The sound, however, captured some recordings. Only the initial knocks, to be specific. In short, there was nothing concrete, nothing that could prove its existence, nothing usable. But I know she's real. I know it because I understood quite a few things when I returned home. Not only that, sometimes I hear her humming when I'm taking a shower or when I'm about to sleep. But on the most restless nights, I can even see her through my bedroom window, if I've had the misfortune of leaving the shutters open. And even if she doesn't say that sentence, when I see her, I can hear it in my head. I have also understood why all this was happening to me. The reader had perfectly succeeded in his plan. I imagine that, just like me, at that precise moment, he was haunted by this woman. I don't know how he found a way to give me back the curse, but I don't plan on keeping this horror on my back for the rest of my days. I too am about to draft an email with that famous Latin phrase. I also plan to give the name of this hotel to a curious person or a ghost hunter. Ask him to pronounce that famous phrase so that this entity will never be after me again. The email will be sent tonight at midnight, like the time when I received the one from my reader. I'm sorry in advance if this is someone you know, but if that's the case, I had no choice. If he doesn't understand that he has to pass the curse on to someone else, it's a good thing, especially for him. But if he has to disappear forever with this woman, even in terrible pain, it's a risk I'm willing to take.